1 year ago, my string of pearls looked like this. This was May 4th, 2024, and here's exactly what I did to fix it. So basically there were no roots to save for this plant. It was severely neglected in a forgotten windowsill after my son was born, and it was basically just wasting away to nothing. So to fix it, I just pulled out all the plant material that I could salvage, and I separated it into variegated and not variegated because there was both in the pot. The most important thing I did was to look for already existing root nodes on the strands that I pulled out of the pot. So when propagating string of pearls, doing this one thing gives me almost 100% success rate with propagations. Now, if you can't find any pre-existing root nodes on the stems, I'll talk about that later in the video. So what I did was I cut right before each root node on the stem so that each cutting had one. Here's a close-up of what the root nodes look like. They're just little bumps on the bottom of the stem. Here's one, and here's one. So here's the growth point over here. So you would want to cut it so that this strand would have a root at the base, or the non-growing end. So I could turn this strand into several cuttings, each with a root if I wanted to. I used a soil mix of 50% orchid bark, 40% perlite, and 10% of just whatever potting mix I had on hand, just a regular potting mix. And I took out the larger pieces of orchid bark because string of pearls have kind of fine roots, and so they don't really like those big, huge, chunky pieces. This mix holds a little bit of moisture, but not a ton. So whatever you use, just make sure that it's well draining. So you don't want something that when you pour water into it, it's gonna stay really like heavy for a long period of time. That's when you end up with overwatering situations. But with a soil mix that drains really well, it's going to be much harder to overwater your string of pearls. All I do is just lightly nestle the strands into the top of the soil. I don't want to totally bury them, but I do want to make sure that the stem and the root nodes are in contact with the soil. And I just curl the cuttings around in the pot. My cuttings are usually a few inches long. I haven't really experimented with taking shorter cuttings to see if there's a difference, because this has been so successful for me in the past that I just keep doing what works. Then I did the same process for the non-variegated ones, the regular green pearls, so I had 2 pots. Since these cuttings all already had root nodes on them, I went ahead and watered them. Then I placed them under a grow light and I put a little humidity dome over top of them, aka a Starbucks lid. The humidity will cause the root nodes to start growing almost immediately, like as soon as they sense the moisture. When string of pearls have those pre-existing root nodes like that, they can root so fast, like in just a couple of days. So this was day 4 after potting these up, and they were already growing roots. After 17 days, the roots had made it to the bottom of the pot. And at that point, since I could see that they're rooted in, I took the humidity domes off to start letting them dry out. So the first watering, I just waited until the pots felt light, like they didn't feel heavy anymore. I could tell the soil was dry before I watered them. I didn't wait until the pearls were showing signs that they needed watering. After 1 or 2 waterings, when I could see that the pearls were rooted and growing, I looked for strands that rooted in multiple spots along the strand, and I cut at each spot where they rooted to turn one strand into several strands. It's the same concept as this, so cut before the root to make several strands out of one. This makes for a much more full pot of string of pearls because at each spot where I cut, it'll have new growth points growing, so it'll end up with a much more full pot in the end. Speaking of full pots, these are the 2 pots that I started on May 4th, and this is on January 18th, 2025. So 8 months of growth to go from this to this. And it was at this point that I potted these 2 pots up together in their current pot, and I made more propagations. This is where propagating without pre-existing root nodes comes in. But first, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video. Palm Street. This is my large form mint monstera that I got on the Palm Street app. You can find great deals on wishlist plants and more, all within the app. Palm Street connects you with independent sellers offering things like rare plants, crystals, handmade goods, and ceramics, like this one-of-a-kind Narikomi pot that my monstera is in, or this beautiful hand-painted pot that my Hoya is clearly loving. I love that I can discover new small businesses and rare plant sellers all in one place, much like an online main street. You can participate in live sales where you get to see and interact with the seller in the chat. You can see the actual plant or item they're selling, and you can ask questions about it. And don't miss out on the giveaways. Live sale giveaways are so much fun. Palm Street turns a cold online transaction into an experience, like walking into a virtual plant shop on Main Street and talking to the business owner face to face. If live sales aren't your speed, you can also shop the seller's buy it now or purge listings. New users get a $5 credit and several other new user perks. Join using my code below, and thanks to Palm Street for sponsoring this video. When I potted these up in their current pot, I gave them a really good trim, and for whatever reason, very few of those cuttings had any pre-existing root nodes on them. So I just proceeded like normal to lay them on top of the soil, put the humidity dome on, put them under a grow light. But this time I decided not to water them right away. I waited about a week before watering them. I figured that if they didn't have root nodes yet, then they might be more likely to just rot if I watered them. I'd like to do an experiment and try it both ways to see what happens, but I watered them after a week, and it took about 30 days for the roots to reach the bottom of the pot, where it only took 17 days for the previous batch with already existing root nodes, so about half the time. Another important factor is going to be light. So this is where my string of pearls lives now. These are some propagations that I did. This is let me see if I can show you the specs on this grow light. Well, it's not actually a grow light. This one is just a regular shop light from Home Depot, but this is 30 watts, 3000 lumens, and 4000 Kelvin, which is like the temperature of the light, the yellowness or the whiteness or whatever. 30 watts is pretty strong, and these are just a little over a foot away from the light. I can link these in the description for you. They're pretty cheap, and they have worked out really well for grow lights for me for a while. So yeah, the strength of the grow light is going to be a big factor. I always look for 30 watts for the strength of the grow lights that I use, just because anything less than that, you might could get away with 20, but like 10 or 5 watt grow lights, it's just not going to be enough light for a string of pearls. But this close to a 30 watt light, that is probably going to be enough light. So my string of pearls got the way it did back in May of 2024 because of just neglect, probably more so due to underwatering than anything else. Like I just forgot to water it a lot and it just kind of withered away. But yeah, it was in a window, in a pretty bright window, so it was getting enough light. It was getting direct sun. Yeah, if you're gonna have them under grow lights, they need to be strong grow lights, because these are more succulent plants. They're not, the big, broad, leafy things, and they need a lot of light. This is what, pretty healthy growth looks like. These pearls are nice and round when they're fully grown. If you start seeing, let me see, these ones are a little bit more spaced out. These were growing kind of under another leaf that I had. I just pulled it out of the way. But these are not getting enough light. These are more spaced out. And I know this is new growth, but these are going to be a little smaller than, say, like these. Because you can already tell these are much more close together than these are. If you start seeing this little like spindly looking growth on your string of pearls, that probably means it needs more light. And they need light on the top of the pot in addition to the strands that are growing down, or they will start to do that and they'll start to look a little more unhealthy. So yeah, light is very important. So to recap, if there isn't much to save from your original plant, you're better off starting over from scratch, especially with string of pearls. Salvage what healthy plant material you can and prioritize finding pre-existing root nodes to increase your success rate. If you don't see a lot of pre-existing root nodes, don't worry. It might just take slightly longer to root and the success rate might be just a little bit lower. Make sure to give cuttings a well-draining mix. Go ahead and water for ones that have pre-existing root nodes, and maybe just wait a few days before you water for ones that don't. Keep them moist and covered until you can tell that they're rooting well. So you'll be looking for new, healthy looking growth. And sometimes the pearls will go from being kind of like squishy and dehydrated to more firm, and that's how you know that they're rooting in. Remove them from the humidity once they're rooting nicely and start letting them dry out a little bit more. For the first watering, just wait until the pot feels light before you water. Don't wait until the pearls are dehydrated. And at this point, you can water with fertilizer normally, just like you would your other plants. For the second watering, I would also just wait until the pot feels light, but maybe go one more day after it feels light, just to kind of start stretching it out a little bit more. And then after that second watering, you can start waiting until the pearls feel slightly squishy before you water. I often just wait until the pearls start looking a little bit dull to water instead of, feeling them to see if they're squishy. Because if they're squishy, that means they're already a little bit dehydrated. So I like to catch them just before that point. So if you've ever had a spider plant and it looks dull before it needs water, the pearls kind of look the same way. They go from being kind of shiny to this more like dull look. And that's when I water my pearls. And don't skimp on light for these. If the propagations are not getting enough light, they're going to be more likely to just rot, and you will probably have a lower success rate. So give them enough light. That's it for this video. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and see you next time.